As you know, AMET is a premier foreign policy think tank and advocacy institute in Washington, D.C. Our members of Congress and their foreign policy staffers, whom we meet with on an almost daily basis, have grown to trust us and rely upon us for up-to-date, accurate information and reliable analyses of what's happening throughout the Middle East. And we are very delighted today to be able to partner with Brigadier General Amir Avivi, Director of Israel's Defense and Security Forum, Habitonistim. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just entered his fourth term in office at an extremely challenging time for Israel. Most of us are aware of the fact that Iran has enriched over 60 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and that the Iranians have been entering into a deeper and closer relationship with Russia and China. On December 29th, when Prime Minister Netanyahu was sworn in, he stated that his four major objectives were, first of all, to block Iran; second, to restore the security and governance within the state of Israel; third, to deal with the cost of living and the housing problem; and fourth, to dramatically expand the circle of peace. Here to discuss these objectives and so many of the great challenges that Israel is currently confronted with is Brigadier General Amir Avivi. As most of you know, Brigadier General Amir Avivi is a highly decorated Israeli general. Amir concluded his service as the head of the Auditing and Consulting Department of the Israeli Defense Establishment, including the Israel Defense Force, the Ministry of Defense, and the Israeli military industries. In this position, Amir managed more than 100 military auditors and advisors. He was responsible for the audit of military readiness, budgeting, procurement projects, bids, cyber logistics, infrastructure, and operations. Amir fulfilled various command positions in the Corps of Engineers, leading thousands of soldiers in a dynamic combat environment. Amir served as Brigadier Commander, Deputy Division Commander, and head of the Military School of Engineers. He also served as the aide-de-camp for the Chief of the General Staff of the IDF, Lieutenant General Moshe or Boogie Ya'alon. Amir was at the heart of the policy-making process in the Israeli government and defense establishment during that term, and as I said, is the director of Habitonistim, Israel's Defense and Security Forum, and it is a profound honor to have you with us today, Amir. Amir, let's first discuss Iran. On April 6, 2021, the P5+1 talks began, with Iran stretching to almost 2 years now. We all remember how Secretary of State Antony Blinken had promised in January of 2020 in his confirmation hearings a longer, stronger deal. The Iranians, with their incredibly unrealistic demands, which included removing the IRGC from the State Department's list of terrorist organizations, permanently ending any possibility of IAEA inspections, and having the U.S. sign off forever that there will be no renewed negotiations, have made it virtually impossible to sign on to a deal. The fact that the Iranians have been assisting the Russians with their war in Ukraine, giving them drones, and the fact of the horrendous human rights situation leading so many thousands, if not millions, of Iranians to the street, risking their very lives, has made it pretty impossible at this point for the Americans to deal with the Iranians and have a new JCPOA. Yet, we have not seen or heard of a plan B from this administration. How receptive do you believe this administration will now be towards having another plan on the drawing board when dealing with the Iranian nuclear situation, as obviously the negotiations have petered out?
Well, Sarah, first of all, thank you for the introduction. It's always a pleasure to participate in your webinars, and I really appreciate the great work that the Met is doing in bringing the truth to the Congress and Senate. It's very, very important. I think that we're witnessing quite a big change now. I mean, for Israel, Iran has always been one of the most terrible enemies, not only for Israel and the region, but for the world. But we know that this administration and also Obama's administration viewed Iran differently. But I think that we can definitely say that things are changing because, first of all, we see Iran in the last year siding clearly with Russia and China. Iran signed a long-term deal with China, economical deal. Iran is cooperating with Russia, working very closely, providing UAVs to the Russian army, which they deploy on everyday basis in Ukraine, basically destroying the infrastructure of Ukraine. More than 50% of Ukraine's infrastructure has been destroyed. And this is during the winter, people are freezing to death. There is no electricity in most of the cities. Now, this is Iranian making. So it's obvious that there is a huge change here. We heard President Biden at a certain stage saying clearly that the deal is dead. I mean, there is an understanding that there is a big change. But as you mentioned, it seems like for a very long time, the US is sitting on the fence. It's not siding clearly with the Sunni world, and it's not siding clearly with the Iranians. It's somewhere in between, and this is a lose-lose situation. I mean, the Sunni world is losing face in America. They feel they cannot trust America anymore. At the same time, the Iranians are feeling the same, and they don't trust America. They don't even let Americans participate in the talks. And I think talking about Israel, that Prime Minister Netanyahu, in a way, is holding the key to bring a real change in this situation. So you mentioned that this government, and specifically Netanyahu, has talked several times about him wanting to expand peace, but he was very specific. He talked about Saudi Arabia. And he talked several times. It's not something common because usually when you work on peace deals, you do it in closed doors and quiet. But here we see a candidate to prime minister, even before he became prime minister, interviewing and saying clearly, this is the main goal I'm going to push forward. I'm going to bring peace with Saudi Arabia. So first of all, for him, such an experienced politician, to say that so clearly, this means that something big is going on. But we have to understand the issue of Saudi Arabia in the right context. For Netanyahu, the most important thing is making sure that Iran won't be nuclear, dealing with Iran. This is the #1 mission of his government. At the moment, everybody is talking about Judea and Samaria, the governance, and and the Supreme Court, which we'll talk about also. But really, in Netanyahu's eyes, it's still Iran. And the way Netanyahu sees the situation is that he can bring a huge win to America, to the administration. I mean, the administration hasn't been very successful in bringing peace around the world. We see war, not peace. We see what's going on in Ukraine, and no deal with the Iranians. There is nothing the administration can say on the international level that is a success. And now comes Netanyahu and basically offers an amazing deal. He's saying, me and the Saudis will bring, it's not one more peace. Saudi Arabia is not another country in the Abraham Accords. It's the country. It's the leader of the Sunni world, of the whole Sunni world. We're talking about Indonesia, Pakistan. It's a huge deal. It's not only Saudi Arabia. Bringing such a deal to the White House this can be a huge deal for this administration, especially talking about elections, which already I'm sure all the politicians in the States are thinking about in 2 years. But it doesn't come free. If the administration wants this huge deal, they need to side with the good guys, which is Israel and the moderate Sunni world against Iran. So this is all connected. There is no deal without America siding with Israel clearly, even to the extent of a military attack on Iran. So really, Netanyahu holds the key to a real change, and it's tempting. I mean, think about it. What a big deal it is. It's not only Saudi Arabia, it's the whole Middle East, it's Indonesia, Pakistan. It's a big deal.
Yeah. So speaking first about Saudi Arabia, and we discussed this before yesterday, we have some concerns that this administration does not seem to have, to say the least, the warmest, closest relationship with Saudi Arabia. President Biden, when he was campaigning, called Saudi Arabia a pariah state. We know that when he was in Riyadh, he asked the Saudis to please increase its oil production so Americans could have more relief at the tank, and they refused to do this. And we know that both the Biden administration as well as the Saudis place a lot of stock first in Palestinian statehood, irrespective of whether or not the Palestinians have proven that they're capable of self-government. So how do we overcome these obstacles? Both, why would the Saudis want to give this gift to the Biden administration while he's in the White House?
Well, first of all, both the Saudis and Israelis see it the same way. We need the US to side clearly with us against Iran. Okay, dealing alone with Iran is much more difficult than building a coalition under American leadership with the Central Command. It's a whole different game. It's completely different. You have such a strong country behind you or leading you than doing it alone. We understand it, and the Saudis understand. But the reason why Biden wasn't at all successful in getting the Saudis to support, to enhance production of oil and so on, it's very simple. It didn't give them anything. He continued with the Iranian deal. He didn't side clearly with Israel and the Sunnis. So why would they give anything? He's not giving anything. So it's obvious that if this deal is pushed forward, as you said, Sarah, it's not only about bringing a huge peace agreement, the biggest maybe we can imagine, but it's also the Saudis will solve the issue of oil prices. They will produce much more and reduce the prices in the US. And there is another thing that is going on, which people maybe are not aware enough. And this is the issue. I don't know if you remember, but when Biden came to Israel, one of the things he did Zoom with India, UAE in Israel, talking about the flow of goods. He talked about the fact that there is a problem with the chain, the supply chain, global supply chain. It's not working. And we need new routes of supply. And when he did this Zoom with India, UAE, and Israel, he basically alluded to a new route that will bypass Egypt and the Suez Canal. And this route will go from India to UAE, and from UAE with a fast train, 300 kilometers an hour, through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, to the ports of Israel, Haifa and Ashdod. Now, if you follow what's going on in Israel with the ports, they have doubled themselves. Now we have we have countries that bought Israeli ports. We have an Indian port in Haifa. We have a Chinese port in Haifa. We have a European port in Ashdod. Huge ports that are supposed to enable supplying the whole world. So basically, and it's already happening. Today, we have a train from Jordan to Haifa. A lot of the supply of the Middle East, we used to go through Syria, Lebanon. These places, you know, they are not working. So everything is going through Israel. So today also the US with trucks is supplying from UAE through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel to the world. This is a huge, huge deal for Israel, for Saudi Arabia. By the way, it will shorten the supply more than a month. More than a month. The moment the goods will arrive to UAE, it will take maybe 7 to 10 hours to bring them to Haifa. It's a game changer. Now we know that Biden is interested in that. He did a Zoom. He talked about that. He didn't talk much about the Palestinians. About that, he talked a lot. So there is a lot going on, and you know, when people are busy thinking that with this new government, the relations between Israel and the US are going to deteriorate, and what about the Palestinians? They're not understanding what is really going on. They have never been, not never, okay, but there is a moment where there is the interest between the US and Israel are becoming really, really strong. There is huge interest here. And I see the countries getting closer. And if Biden has common sense, and I think he does have common sense, he will seize the moment and understand how huge this deal is. It's a game changer for the US, but also for Israel and Saudi Arabia.
In terms of the Palestinian issue, however, and during the Abrahamics, there was the Peace Through Prosperity program, and many of the Palestinian leaders did not accept this as being genuine. Do you think if there will be a deal with Saudi Arabia, something like that could be worked out, and there could be some kind of incentivization program for the Palestinians to accept it?
Look, we did all the Abraham Accords without anything going on with the Palestinians. I want to explain something about the Palestinians. The Palestinians have been an asset to the Arab world to delegitimize Israel and to fight Israel. Now, that has been going for many years, since Obama. They became a liability on the way of the Arab world to get closer to Israel. Basically, the Arab world has never cared about them. They will say, you know, yeah, we support the Palestinians. They don't care at all, okay? Not only they don't care, they detest them. In the Arab world, Palestinians are not even human beings. So what will probably happen is that Netanyahu will let Smotrich and Ben Gvir say that they want to apply sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. It was at the time of Trump. Netanyahu will say to the Saudis, listen, if we do this peace agreement, I will postpone this. I will not do now this sovereignty act. But if we don't do peace, that's my next option. And then the Saudis will say, we saved Palestine, you know, we postponed, or we like exactly what the UAE said and Bahrain and so on. So the interests are clear, okay? And this is one thing. The other thing, talking about the Palestinians, is that everybody now in the Palestinian Authority, and also us, we're talking about Abu Mazen. The Palestinian Authority, as we speak, is falling apart. It's falling apart, and today, when you say it's falling apart, everybody says, yeah, sure, it's common knowledge. It's clear that the day after Abbas, there is a good chance that there will be no Palestinian Authority anymore. So any talk about moving anything forward with the Palestinians, it's a waste of time.
Right.
The Palestinian Authority, it's not only almost not functioning, it's probably the most dangerous enemy Israel has. They are more dangerous than Hamas. Because Hamas, it's a terror organization, they have rockets, they have military capabilities. We know how to deal with their capabilities, but what the Palestinian Authority is doing, legitimizing Israel, delegitimizing the Jews all around the world, all the anti-Semitism that all you guys are suffering from, BDS, it's all Palestinian Authority. They are behind. When you website, and I invite you to do it, Google it, go down. At the end of the website, it says it's run by BNC, which is the Palestinian groups, led by Palestinian Authority. Everything that the Jews are suffering in the world is because of that. So I won't be sorry to see them go. I think there are other alternatives which are probably worth talking about in another webinar. But saying that if there is no Palestinian Authority, the only alternative is Hamas or Jihad, it's not true. Tell you, there are other options, but they are not an option. It's not a good option for us. And I think, by the way, it's not a good option for the Palestinians. They hate them. I mean, Abbas has almost zero support in the Palestinian street. They're waiting for him to go, and they rather have even Israel controlling them and not him. So this is what's going on with the Palestinian Authority, and I think that it will be interesting to see what will happen in the next year or two, because something will happen. The guy won't stay alive forever.
Right. Yeah, at least there will be truth in advertising when the Palestinian Authority goes. Yeah, and people will know. Just getting back to Iran, on December 25th, in an interview with Al Arabiya, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that, quote, "I'm committed to do whatever I can to prevent Iran from having a nuclear arsenal. I naturally won't itemize that here, but that's a firm commitment that I've made to myself and to the people of Israel. I want to protect ourselves against Iran's aggression and against a regime that openly calls for the annihilation of my country." He then noted he would take the necessary measures, quote, with or without an agreement with Washington. What do you think the international response would be if Israel does decide to take matters into their own hands? And what do you think America's response will be?
Well, first of all, we have experience. We did it twice with the Iraqi nuclear program and with the Syrian nuclear program. I think that there will be relief. They might say, this is wrong, but really everybody's worried about Iran being nuclear. Nobody will be sad if Israel does the job. But it worries me that the world is actually tending to rely on Israel to solve its problems. Israel is a strong country, but again, Iran is huge. It's a huge challenge. It's not something Israel should do alone. And really, it's for us to convince the Western world, and especially the US, to do that. I can tell you that when we had meetings in the Senate and Congress, whether we met Republican senators and congressmen or Democrats, in a closed room, they all said the same. Guys, do the job, go destroy, rely on yourself. Okay, we can do that, but really, I think that I believe there is still a chance that there will be a change, whether it will be this administration, the next one, a change in an understanding that the world needs to deal with Iran. Iran is a global threat. It's not just a threat to Israel. An example from Abraham Accords, we see Morocco making peace with Israel, not only making peace by signing an MOU, military MOU. It's the only country, Arab country, that has an military MOU with Israel. Now, why? Why does Morocco need a military MOU with Israel? Why do that? And the answer is simple. The Iranians are trying to destroy Morocco. And they're doing that by weaponizing Polisario, which is the terror organization, some would say liberation organization of West Sahara that is fighting Morocco. And Iran is also weaponizing Algeria as an enemy of Morocco. And of course, the question would be why? Why Iran is going all the way, thousands and thousands of kilometers, dealing with Morocco? And the answer is very simple, talking about chain of supply. Iranians think globally. Why Morocco? Morocco is on the Gibraltar Straits. This is the most strategic place in the world. So look where Iran is operating. It's operating in Yemen, controlling Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb in Yemen, basically controlling the entrance to the Red Sea. And they want to control Morocco and the Gibraltar Straits. This is aspiring to global dominance. So how can we agree to have a country like that being nuclear with this crazy regime? And I'm not even talking about Venezuela and the fact they're producing UAVs that can reach the US from Venezuela. This is the new Cuba. The 2022-2023 Cuba in Venezuela.
Right. There's a huge Hezbollah presence in South America and even many cells here in continental United States. They want Shiite hegemony. That's what they aim for.
Sure.
So many Americans and many American Jews are very concerned about the proposed overhaul of the judicial system in Israel. Even within Israel, former Israeli Chief Justice Aaron Barak has called the legislation by Justice Minister Yariv Levin to overhaul the judicial system, quote, a chain that will strangle Israel's democracy. Can you please describe the difference between the Israeli Supreme Court and the American one, and why this sort of judicial overhaul might or might not be necessary?
Okay, I want to first say something that is in the realm of common sense, okay? Israel, from 48 to the beginning of the 90s, was a flourishing democracy. And in this flourishing democracy, the Israeli society had very, very high esteem of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court and the IDF were at the same level of appreciation of the Israeli society. And nobody can argue that Israel wasn't a democracy until the beginning of the 1990s. And then came Aaron Barak. And Aaron Barak, by himself, one-man show, decided to change end-to-end the relationship between the Supreme Court, the government, and the Knesset. And the change was so radical that the Supreme Court became almost everything: the government, the Knesset, and judges. And because judges don't know everything, and they took responsibilities of politicians, they also did huge mistakes. And during this time, the Israeli society has became more and more angry about what is going on, because we can see the result at the end of the day when you look at the last elections, or you look at the last decade or two. Terrible deterioration in governance, terrible deterioration in crime, terrible deterioration in personal security, very bad decision taken concerning all these Eritreans and other illegal immigrants that went into Israel. The government gave solutions, and the judges stopped the solution, and we remained with tens of thousands of illegal immigrants in Israel. And now, basically, the government is saying, we want to reverse it and not even bring it back to what was in the 90s. I mean, sometimes when you do changes, it's hard to really change them completely back. But let's say theoretically that they would have changed everything back to the 90s. So weren't we a democracy in the 90s? Of course we were. So I would say that the steps the government wants to do, first of all, are logical. And the other thing is they're within democratic discussion. I'll give an example. In the US, judges are chosen by politicians. It's the president that decides who will be there. It's the Congress and Senate that approve it. All of it, 100% politicians. In Israel, we have a system where there is a committee that has a majority judges and the representation of a lawyers group, and the politicians are in minority. The judges are choosing themselves. Guess what? Are choosing people like them. Very specific kind. So the government now says, they are not saying, okay, let's be like the Americans. Let's choose judges only with politicians. No, they're not saying that. They're saying we have Knesset, we have government, we have judges, third. Third of the representation will be the government, third will be the Knesset, third, still the judges. Not only that, they still let the judges veto, which to me is veto a candidate. So this is an example of when you don't go to details and you don't know really what we're talking about, then you hear an Israeli politician saying, that's it. This is the end of democracy. Really? This is the end of democracy? So until the 90s, the judges didn't think, and they don't really have by law, have the right to cancel laws. And then by themselves, although it's not written in the law, on the contrary, it's written otherwise, they decided they can cancel laws. And since the 90s, they canceled 22 laws. Now, the government is saying, first of all, who gave you the permission to decide that you can cancel laws? But the government is not saying now, okay, you are not canceling laws anymore. The government is saying, first of all, basic law, which is in the Israeli system, like constitution, you cannot cancel. Can the Supreme Court in the US cancel the Constitution? No, they cannot. And so Israeli government said the same. If our system, the basic law is kind of a constitution, you cannot cancel it. You are beneath the constitution, not above it. One thing. The other thing that they are saying, listen, canceling a law, it's no joke. Something that the Supreme Court is not supposed to do. But if we want to do it, then you need to convene all of the judges, all of the 15 judges, and do it with a big majority. That's it. This is the end of democracy? No, it's common sense. Now you can say, maybe it's not 12 out of 15, maybe it should be 10 out of 15. Okay, let's have the discussion, but this is not what's going on in Israel. There is one side that has, the government that has a very clear idea what they want. And there is another side saying we need to do mutiny. This is the end of democracy. Armageddon, the end of civilization. Who knows? So I think that one of the things that we're doing now is saying to the politicians and to public figures, guys, get into proportions, okay? Even if the government will manage to do 100% of what they want to do, it's still democracy, and maybe even better one. So instead of shouting, instead of saying that we'll take out millions of people outside from there, and I will do I don't know what, argue. Say, give another suggestion. Argue about that, but in a normal way, in a democratic way. So this is talking about the judiciary system. Now, I'll tell you something, Sarah, interesting. You know, during the elections before the government was formed, we in IDSF, we did a survey. And the survey asked the people of Israel, all of them Jews, Arabs, all of them Jews, what are the most important things for you? What is important for you, guys? And it was very interesting to see that the top two, but by far, okay, were personal security and the cost of living. Okay? Now, the only parties that talked about personal security and cost of living in the elections were the right-wing parties. The Likud talked about cost of living, and Ben-Gvir and Smotrich talked about personal security, with Ben-Gvir basically leading this. And the center and left parties, they stuck with issues that when we checked in our survey, were not really interesting to the Israeli society. For example, issues of religion. It was, if personal security got like 60%, religion got 20%. Politicians might think that it's a big deal, but the society doesn't think that this is a big deal. But what I was worried when I looked at this survey was that from 10 things that we asked about, the last one, and with only 2% versus 60% or 63%, was the diaspora and the anti-Semitism. And to me, it was really troubling, because it seems to me that the Israeli society is really so bothered by what's going on inside Israel that they don't have a lot of attention to look outside and look at the millions of Jews that are living in the US and Canada and Australia and so many places, and have so many challenges. And we know that politicians tend to deal with what their voters want. And one of our challenges in IDSF is telling the government, listen, in this case, when you're talking about millions of Jews, that are threatened and under anti-Semitism and delegitimation, this is something you have to deal with as a government, and very, very seriously, even if your voters are bothered with everyday life, with cost of living, with personal security, and other issues. And we're working very hard to make sure that budgets and attention are allocated to deal with this huge challenge of what's going on with the legitimation, anti-Semitism, and so on.
Right. Finally, and I'm going to take some time to turn you over to my wonderful colleague, Hussein Abubakar Mansour, who is fielding the questions that have come in and probably will pose some of his own. But Prime Minister, or former Prime Minister rather, Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz have said that they are coming to Washington to register their objections about this Israeli government. Do you have any messages that you would like to convey to them?
Well, definitely. I think that it is disgraceful. I mean, we, as the country of the Jewish people, have to work out our issues in our own country. And it's okay to argue, it's okay not to agree. You don't go and sell out your country for politics. Because at the end of the day, what is happening is that when they go and speak with the administration, this is not hurting the government. This is hurting Israel. All of us. All of us. For example, if, let's say, they convince the administration that this is not a legitimate government, they are destroying democracy, and because of that, let's say that the US decides not to give Israel any more military support, or not to defend us in the UN. This is devastating the country, not for the government. You don't play politics outside of your country. If you want to do politics, no problem, but not like that. And I think that everything that's going on now is completely out of proportions, whether it's going to the administration or the Congress and Senate, or whether it's claiming that the end of democracy has arrived because we're changing the way we choose judges. Wow, terrible.
All right. With that, I will turn you over to my wonderful colleague, Hussein Abubakar Mansour. Hussein?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much, Brigadier General Avivi, for being with us today. And thank you for all our listeners who tuned in to listen to our webinar and sent us a lot of questions. We've received a lot of questions about a variety of topics. This is a very, this presentation touched on a lot of many things. So there's not going to be an order to a lot of these questions, but I can already tell that we're not going to have the time to go through all over them. Go through all of them. So I want to apologize to our listeners. I'm going to start with the tough questions to make sure that we get to them. We received questions about the fact that some of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition partners want to change the right of return law. And that, of course, will affect a lot of diaspora Jews, including a lot of American Jews, and may negatively impact the relationship between American Jews and Israel. What can you say about this? Do you have any comment about this issue at all?
I think it's a very, very delicate issue. I don't think this is the first thing the government should deal with. I think that one of the challenges we have, especially because by law we enable Aliyah to people who are not Jewish, according to Jewish religion, but there are grandsons or sons or daughters of people who were Jewish. The real issue is how we help them become Jewish, and not in a way that is almost impossible. I mean, how do we manage to treat people who are what we call in Hebrew Israel, the seed of the people of Israel, that they belong to the people of Israel, but they're not Jewish, become Jewish? Because today we have more than 500,000 Israelis who are this kind of people who are not Jewish. It's terrible, and we are making lives really hard to make Jewish. And this is something that I think that there is a big responsibility here with the rabbis, with the leading rabbis of Israel, and to really show courage and find solutions to make sure that we can absorb as many Jews as possible and make them Jewish. I can tell you a short story about that. When I was at the camp of the Chief of General Staff of Bogi Elon, Sharon, Prime Minister Sharon at the time, was the Prime Minister. He was a legendary man, and it was a terrible time. Endless amounts of terror attacks and so on. And each time I went with the Chief of Staff to meet the Prime Minister, we come, we sit, we come to talk about all the situation, what's going on. And Prime Minister stops the staff and tells him, I want to know one thing. How many soldiers went to Nativ and became Jewish? And every time he asks the same question, because they managed to find a program in the army that enabled to take soldiers that were not Jewish and made them Jewish in an easier way than usually it's done. It's all he cared about, with all these terror attacks and everything. And that's what he wanted to know every time, because he understood the importance of this issue. And if we know how to do it in Nativ, and it's authorized by the rabbis, so why not do it also in other programs?
Thank you. We received a question asking if in the polls, the most two important concerns were personal safety and the cost of living, why were the results of the election so close? Almost 50-50. If those were really pressing issues, why didn't the right have an overwhelming victory over left-wing parties?
Sorry, but the right had an overwhelming winning by far. I mean, I don't see any 50-50 here. I see 64 mandates. And when you're talking about, by the way, Jewish votes, which is important because it's a Jewish state, the vast majority of the Jews vote to the right. Well, you have 64 mandates. On the other side, you have 10 mandates of Arabs who are anti-Zionism. And what's left? So I think that the vote was very, very clear. And not only that, we also had a left-wing party like Meretz that didn't pass the threshold. I mean, when you look at the left in Israel, which is basically today Meretz and Labour Party, Meretz didn't pass the threshold historically for the first time, and the Labour Party got 4 mandates. There is no left in Israel. Now, the other parties are considered center, and inside these parties, you have right-wing people. Lieberman is right-wing, all his party is right-wing. Now, we have to understand, it's people who don't want to sit with Netanyahu because it's Netanyahu, but they are right-wing, but they oppose Netanyahu. Benny Gantz, half of his party is right-wing. I mean, if I count MKs, I would say that maybe 75 to 80 MKs are center-right, right-wingers. What is also interesting is to see the young generation, and this is very different in the States. When they checked in the polls what would happen if only the young generation would choose the government. Then the poll showed more than 70 mandates to the same parties we are seeing now in the government. A third of the Israeli soldiers chose Ben-Gvir. You had whole battalions. So it's obvious that the Israeli society is going right. Okay, and you see also the agenda. I mean, if the main agenda of the left was the peace agreement and Palestinians and so on, they're not talking about it anymore. So Israeli society is changing, and it's changing to the right.
Thank you. You spoke of basic laws of Israel, and we received a question asking, do basic laws of Israel require anything more than just the majority of the vote of the Knesset to amend, invalidate, or change, or to add? And if it's only just a simple Knesset majority, how they can constitute a widely accepted structural foundation for the state?
Yeah, first of all, it depends which kind of basic law, but we have to understand something about Israel. This is something that Ben-Gurion understood very well. When the state of Israel was established, they talked at the beginning about a constitution, and then very fast they understood that it's not good for Israel because we're such a complex country that law cannot encompass the complexity. I'll give an example. Take the army, for example. My daughter, by law, needs to go to the army. My son needs to go to the army. In the Druze community, the boys, by law, supposed to go to the army. The daughters, no. So if I look at it from a legal stance, I would say there is no equality. Why my daughter would go to jail if she doesn't go to the army? And a Druze girl is not going to the army. It's not fair from a legal stance. But this is not a legal issue, it's a cultural issue. Okay? So the legal system has no solutions for the real issues of Israel. The real issues of Israel can be solved only on the political level, by talking. This is why, for example, in the religious Zionist groups, you have a special program where they go a year and a half to study Torah, and then they have a special program in the army. Somebody who is not religious doesn't have this program. Again, from looking at it from a legal stance, it's not fair. But this is not how things work. They are much more complex. Judge and no law can encompass the complexity and the challenges of Israel. Only on the political level you can deal with it, and the society can deal with it. And therefore, Ben-Gurion's idea was, as little laws as we have, the better. And at the beginning, we had very few laws. And it worked well, by the way. And one of the problems in Israel is that Israel has become, in the last 20, 30 years, more and more a country that is trying to be run by laws, and it's not going to work. No, there's no way it can work in Israel. Because if you talk about, okay, we want equality. No, you cannot have equality in Israel. In many different aspects, you cannot have, exactly as the Jews, women won't go to the army. Or you don't have equality because the ultra-religious have their own issue. And this is just the army. I'm giving one example, and imagine in how many other areas this is relevant. So basically, it's not that the fact, yes, a basic law requires 61 and it's a regular majority, but it's the fact of the matter is that it doesn't change every day. It's rarely changes. Something that the Knesset has its checks and balances. It's not things that happen so fast, and it's working quite well, I would say.
Thank you. We've received a question asking why do Prime Minister Netanyahu believes that he needs two foreign ministers? I believe the question is about the fact that there is a foreign minister, Eli Cohen, and then there is now a strategic affairs minister, Ron Dermer, who's also being said, or some reports say he's going to be like kind of a foreign minister or a shadow foreign minister. Why does the Israeli government needs two foreign ministers?
I'm not Netanyahu's spokesman. Need to ask Netanyahu. No.
That's a fair answer. I want to apologize to all of our listeners who sent us questions, and we're not going to have the time to go through them. We received a lot of questions specifically about the laws with the laws of returns and these things, but we received also a big number of questions about Iran specifically. There are reports that Iran have accumulated enough enriched materials. Somebody mentioned that there was a BBC report citing an Israeli intelligence official saying that they can practically have 4 bombs if they so choose. How are things standing with Iran right now in terms of Israel's capacity, if they must, to take out the Iranian nuclear infrastructure without the assistance of the United States if they have to?
Well, Israel has enhanced dramatically the preparations for such a scenario and working on it all the time. And at the end of the day, Chief of Staff said it clearly, we have the capability. And I think with time it's going also to improve. But again, this is not the best option. The best option is convincing the administration that it needs to lead an operation against the nuclear capabilities of Iran, the coalition. I think that at the time, the decision to move Israel from EUCOM to CENTCOM, and this enables a complete coordination between the US, the Sunni Arab states, and Israel. I believe that the American Security Administration has a good sense of what's going on in Iran and understands well the challenges and the threats, and advise the president on that. And I'm sure that the president is aware of the challenges. And I think eventually we'll have to deal with it, whether by ourselves or hopefully with the US.
So with that, I would really like to thank you so much, Amir, for your very, very, very important and very honest briefing today. I would like to encourage all of our listeners to support the Israel Defense and Security Forum. You could go to idsf.org to see how to do this, to support the very, very important work of Brigadier General Amir Avivi and many, many, many other members of Israel's national security establishment who have signed up and joined onto this, as well as to keep your support for medonline.org, to please, and it's idsf.org.il for Israel at the end, idsf.org.il, and also for Amet at ametonline.org, in order for us to keep up our critically important work educating members of Congress on Capitol Hill about the strategic importance of the state of Israel for America's national security interests, which is very, very important. We're not just doing this to support the state of Israel as much as we all strongly and passionately believe in a secure and free democratic state of Israel, but we know that Israel is America's most vital secret weapon in the Middle East right now. So if you can also support ametonline.org, we would appreciate it very, very much. And again, I can't thank you enough Brigadier General Amir Avivi, for your extremely honest and cogent and powerful remarks today. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Bye-bye.